There we are. We're good.
Okay. Just.
Perfect. We're all live, Paul. We're all ready.
Good evening, everyone. Evening, sir. Our budget's on page 19, if everybody. Put it on there. Throughout most of our budget. Everything pretty much, we try to stay as in line with the year before as we could. Any increases in the main part of the operating budget is just based upon what things cost us this year. So all we did, any increases that were in there were increases that were stuff that cost us more this year than it had previously. Under regular compensation for the firefighters. Those of you who were on the board and on the committee last year. We always try to keep the firefighters' compensation the same as basic EMTs. To keep it across the board. We all know they had a significant increase last year. So in an effort to help out the budget and the taxpayers, we only took half of that raise last year with the intention of taking the other half this year. To help out. So that's included in there as well. Before I talk about the per diem firefighters, is there any particular line item that anybody wants to talk about before we move on? Any questions?
You just want to give a little, just so everybody knows, because the LoSAP is new.
Yeah.
Just an overview of what that program is.
Absolutely. LoSAP stands for Length of Service Award. It's a program that we've been working on to try to get through the state. It was approved several years ago, but never funded. The legislature approved the program, but then didn't put any money into it until last year. And what it is, it's a sort of a retirement program for volunteer firefighters and EMS services that run on volunteers. And it's based on your length of service, percentage that you respond. Peg and Julie and I met with the administrator from the state, and it's quite a formula to figure out what everybody gets. But the town can do their match into it. So where it says the LoSAP, that's just a town contribution into that program. For some of us who are on the downhill slope of our career, this isn't going to benefit us much. But for people like Gabe Cooley and DJ and Eli and some of those others that are coming on board that are young and have a whole career ahead of them, it might equate to something for them when they finally retire from this. So it's a nice thank you to put towards it. And again, it's also funded through the state. Julie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that because you've had experience with it.
I like the LoSAP program. We did it a little bit differently from whence I came, but I'll just give you an idea of, you don't realize how quickly it adds up with the annual contribution. One of the neatest things that I experienced in New Jersey was a young firefighter who started when he was 18. We were about 6 years into it. And there the town could make a contribution, and I believe the state at the time matched it. And the residents added a little bit more each year. And one time this young firefighter was in my office and he was talking about how he wanted to purchase a house, but he just didn't have enough down payment money. to make that purchase. And I said, well, have you thought about your LoSAP? And he said, no, I didn't think about that. He was able to take money from that fund that had been set aside and make a down payment and become a homeowner, and that was huge. And everybody kind of, in the beginning, when we started talking about a very small deduction for each firefighter, nobody thought, well, it's not gonna really make anything, but you make the deduction, you put it in. You make the contribution and it sits there, and if it's properly invested, it can make money. And that's just one little story of something great that LoSAP provided for somebody that you just never think of. So,
And the amount that's contributed varies by town. Alma put $2,000 per firefighter in. Damascotta has a quite lengthy formula to figure out how much that they put in based upon responses. Start out, we just requested $250 per firefighter, just to be able to start the program here. So that's where that amount came from.
and at some point, we're thinking the state is going to improve the funding to this.
That's correct. Right now, the funding that the state put to is just to administer the program.
So. What do the firefighters get paid to respond to a fire, or is there a tier system?
There is not a tier system. All our firefighters are paid the same. Currently around $18 an hour.
We go to 20 in this
It
budget.
would go to 20 in this budget.
So
2-hour call out. 2-hour call out. Unless the truck doesn't roll for whatever reason, if we get canceled before we get here, then we do an hour.
just from my own education, LoSAP. The town is paying $250 per firefighter,
Correct.
Our contribution.
and. We have a volunteer fire department, so what is the minimum requirement for that? I mean, there are some firefighters that respond all the time, there are some that don't. Is there, or do we just, is it across the board, 250 per firefighter on your road?
Across the board, 250. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't look towards something like that in the future, as far as an incentive to get more people to show up.
Yeah, so there's no minimum time, they have to be on the roster, yes.
So they could, I'm just trying to understand, so the town is paying 250 per firefighter. If they don't roll, if they could be on the roll, you would have a requirement for them to participate at a certain amount, is that right?
Not a per se, like there's no threshold that they gotta cross or come. But if somebody's not showing up, Dale and I meet with them, find out what's going on.
They have to participate in training.
Yeah. Yes,
To be on the rolls.
correct.
What kind of response have you had to the main purse? The retirement on main purse,
None, because we don't qualify currently.
but you're budgeting 69.
That's,
Or am I reading the wrong one?
that, nope, that falls under the.
Oh, that is sorry, thank you.
No.
Vehicle maintenance,
Yes,
everything looking good. The, obviously, had a really 2022, 23, and nothing,
yeah,
doing good. That's gonna be enough for maintenance, so.
we're hoping so. We're hoping that with our new mechanic. Our situation's a little different than some of the others. Half of each truck can be worked on at Public Works. The other half can't, because it's certified fire equipment that has to be, still go back to our regular mechanic where we go in Auburn. However, we're hoping, anticipating that if this program works out with our town mechanic, we gotta wait and see how much time he has. No reason we can't get him certified to do the whole thing too, is what we would love to have. But a little premature to,
Well, truck side is fine. Truck side, no, fine. You can do a truck side, no problem.
he can do the truck side, no problem. Yeah.
Versus before you guys were sending for service,
Mhm.
your engines are going to
Initially, we were going to Casco.
Casco to get service.
Yeah, once Dick Glidden
Trucks out of
retired, we started going to Casco. Then they sold out to Allegiance Trucks. And they now have a place in Auburn, which is much easier for us. Takes about half the time to get there. And but we still will be going there because our pump service has to be done there. And any warranty work on the truck has to be done there.
Typically, depending on the truck, how often is that happening for pump side? Your annual service.
Our annual service, yeah, we take about a month. And to get them all cycled through and going over there. Every once in a while, you'll have an issue with a valve or something that has to go. It's cheaper for me to drive the truck over there and have them fix it than to pay their emergency call out and come here. So I just take the day and I drive it over. So we haven't had any real overly major things. We've had to do a lot of work on engine 3. Engine 1 did a lot of work this year. We had a freezing issue with engine 2. That came up during that severe cold snap.
Do any other towns in the area have their own mechanic working on their fire trucks?
Not that I've been told, but I haven't inquired either.
Just thinking of a way to make money, sorry. Trying to make you a cost center, revenue stream.
Yes,
Can I ask how the per diem system works? I know how a per diem nurse works. But there's a big pool of nurses out there and you can. I don't know whether it's a union hall or whatever, but you can get a nurse on a per diem basis. Is there a pool of per diem firefighters out there?
well. This would be something new for us, so we're ready to head into that discussion. I'm happy to go ahead. What we've been noticing is happening with us is. Well, we've had two things that are. Number one, a lot of our department, of our roster, majority of our roster does not work in the town of Waldoboro. They all work elsewhere. Off the top of my head, we've got 3 in Rockland, we've got 4 in Bass. There was 5 of us in Damascotta. We all work out. The ones that are still in town, we've got 2 at the transfer station. We got 1 that works at the Big Apple when they're open. And then we have our retired folks that are still here in town that respond to it. So it's taking us time for us to drive back here when we get a call. And to be completely honest, sometimes we wait and listen to hear what kind of a call it is. Some of us, not me, I don't punch out, but some of them have to punch out and leave their job to come back here. I might have to finish something up before I can come back. So we'll listen, see what type of call it is. We have I am responding on our phone, so we know who's coming, so we can check it and see. So there's been a delay during that time period, just because of where we're coming from. The other thing that's happening, and I'm very careful how I say it, is that our retired folks, the ones that are still in town, aren't getting any younger. They're the ones we're relying on during the day. And it's making it much more difficult on them. Just because of life. We lost 2 of our primary folks, and we didn't lose them. They're still around and help us. But we lost 2, 1 because of his age and 1 because of health issues that were our prime driver operators during the day. And that was a huge loss to us. So even if we look at, the response during the day, the stuff, and we've got all kinds of data that that we could share. Some of the stuff it doesn't show you is the age of those people that are responding, that are coming in. We've looked at all kinds of ways. This isn't a problem unique to Waldeboro. This is a problem across the country. But right here, on the mid coast, we've dealt with it. We're fortunate. We live on a border town, so we associate with Knox County and with Lincoln County. And we have tried to come up with solutions together as a group, in both counties. Knox County Commissioners are in the process right now of doing a complete study of fire and EMS over there on their side, to come up with recommendations. On Lincoln's side, we actually sat down with fire chiefs from Damascotta and Newcastle. We tried to see if there was any way we could come up with a plan where Waldeboro would take a day, the next day Damascotta would take a day, the third day Newcastle would take a day, and then we'd start over. And we'd cover all three towns for that one day. The response from our roster, from Waldeboro's roster, was great. People were interested, wanted to look into it some more. Newcastle and Damascotta, they didn't have support from within to do that. I'm still open to that. I'm still hoping that something like that, something's gonna have to happen. If we don't do it this year, we know it's coming. You know, and I'm open to doing something collaboratively, regionally, you know, with other departments. You know, whatever we can come up with. The per diem program is the only thing that I can come up with that I can say, I think this is gonna help us. Johnny Daigle's been wonderful, talking with him for months. We started to allow Mark Gifford can leave the transfer station during the day. Sometimes that's great, other times Mark has been able to leave. You know, if somebody's out at the transfer station, he can't leave. If it's snowing, he has to plow. So he can't stop plowing. You know, so it's not 100%, it's not all the time. Johnny also has been more than willing to work with us and see if some of their public works employees might come down and be part of the fire department and respond to help us during the day. Again, similar to the situation with Mark, it all depends if it's snowing or plowing or they're anticipating a storm, they're not here. You know, they could be in the middle of a project where it wouldn't be safe to leave, you know, a road open when they're replacing a culvert or something. They could be in Washington hauling sand from the pit. Would it help? You better believe it would help. We look forward to working with them. Just not going to be all the time. And I guess that's what it comes down to. It's simply what level of service do you expect from us? We can't operate the way we did 30 years ago when a lot of folks lived and worked here in town. You know, Mr. Butler, when his business was here in town, he was extremely supportive of allowing employees to leave. Not every employee, I don't want to say that they're not willing to, they may not be able to allow folks to go. We've done a posting for more firefighters. Put it on the sign out front. We did Facebook, we did Twitter. Peg did Indeed. It's on our website for the town. Last couple of weeks, we got 2 applicants. One of them I think it's gonna work out, but he's it's just like the rest of us. He has a day job and sometimes he works nights. So he might be available during the day, might not be available during the day. The other one wanted full-time. He's currently a stay-at-home dad and he's not available at all during the days. Because he can't, he's a stay-at-home dad, so he's got to stay at home. So we are trying to reach out to more. That the issue that we have with that part of it is our roster's full, like our gear racks are full. And we do payroll every 2 weeks, and during that 2 week period, most of the time, we have 100% participation. Which means that during 2 weeks, every one of the people on our roster has showed up at least once on there. We don't have a problem with really folks coming in the evening. You know, we're during the night, we all have trouble getting out of bed and getting up. But everyone's showing up, and so that trying to narrow it down to just get daytime firefighters has been difficult. So what I prepared here, that's for you folks to consider. This is my recommendation. One of the concerns about per diem, now getting to your question.
Yeah, that was a long way.
Yeah,
Understand the need.
I felt that we needed to do all that before we got to that part. If we do go with per diems, I don't think it's gonna last more than a year or two. Being able to operate with per diems. I think what's gonna end up happening is that the towns around us are gonna have to do the same thing. You know, if we're the first ones, then we have a larger pool to pull from. And as time goes on, that pool is gonna get much smaller, and I think it's gonna become much more difficult to fill those shifts. I got a phone call this morning from one of the Knox County chiefs. He didn't ask for per diems because he didn't want to deal with the headache of trying to fill the shifts. So his town's going to 2 full-time firefighters. We're starting with one in July and the second one in January. So it'd be less of an impact in the budget this first year. But next year they'd be operating with the 2. If we start with per diems, I just want to be very honest and upfront. I don't think it's gonna last a very long time. Because I think that.
Well, that was sort of my follow-on question. I don't really understand. This $240,000 is basically a full-time employees, pretty close to it, maybe even more. Again, I don't understand the distinction between a per diem and a full-time employee, and why you're not coming to us and asking to be staffed 24/7.
For a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to make sure that it's gonna make a big difference, that this is gonna work. Another thing is, if we had full-time employees, I wouldn't be as free to be able to look for other avenues with other towns. If we entered into some sort of an agreement where, like the Damascotta Newcastle thing that we tried to get going. If we had per diems, we'd have to let anybody go. They're not full-time employees. So that was sort of the direction that I was going.
I just want to clarify too, that the part-time employees, the 240,000, that includes the volunteers and what they get paid. 133,350 is for the 2 per diem
Okay,
firefighters.
so that's still 2 years.
Yeah. But we talked about it, but there was a significant more when you get the health insurance and all of that working. It's a lot. But it was a significantly more.
When we had the meeting with a bunch of us, you said you had Damascotta and Newcastle. Potentially going in on this. Are they still going in on this?
No,
They backed out.
yeah, no, that's what I said, because that was,
Oh, well, yeah, you didn't come out and say that, but is that what happened? They've backed off it?
yeah, they didn't have the internal support
Okay,
in their departments
okay.
to do it.
So Paul, what are they gonna do?
They don't know what they're gonna. They don't know what they're gonna do.
You have some information on how many calls a year do you have? And And has that changed over time, or has it stayed about the same?
No, it's been increasing. A lot of it has to do with accidents, car accidents. We're doing a lot more car accidents than we do other stuff. Calls have been steadily going up. To get the actual numbers, because there's some like storm calls that might have 6 calls within one. So to peel them back to get to it, there was an actual thing. DJ, what were just the total numbers of the calls? Or do you have it, Kyle? Just for the last couple of years. It averages 250 to 300 would be the most. But it'd be in that ballpark.
Okay.
But we do have them for the years if you want them.
2019, 261, 2020 was 300, which that was a storm year where we had a number of crazy storms where we're, crazy. 2021, 243 post-COVID and 268 the last calendar year. And the last check, I think we're well above that, on track for more than 268 this year.
And that's overall calls. That's not during that window. during
Correct.
The day. That's
That's
total
correct.
calls.
You can break it out.
Yeah. You got to do some.
All mine is up. So you can see, but
Have you,
go ahead, Scott.
So, if we did have 2 full-time firefighters during the day, I mean, how many are required to go to a call on a truck? Is it 2, 4?
There's no requirement that go on the truck. It's if it's a fire and they get there and they have to go interior. You have 2 firefighters that go inside, you have to have 2 firefighters outside,
Okay,
ready to go in to.
so do you feel that if there were 2 full-time firefighters, having those 2, per diem firefighters during the day, that the additional volunteers that show up would be able to respond to these calls much quicker than how you presented it earlier, where you're actually sometimes waiting to make a call on whether we're responding or not?
Yeah, we believe that the truck would be able to get right out the door with the 2 folks on them, depending on which call it is, would depend on which truck that they would take. The rest of us would still be responding. However, there would be a truck that would get there immediately, like,
Correct.
we're a volunteer fire department, so at night, you have to understand that it takes 7 to 8 minutes, probably average, for us just to get to the fire station. All right, then we need time to get our gear on, get in the truck, wait for a few more to get onto the truck, and then we got drive time from the station to wherever the call is. So that's the way volunteer fire departments work. During the daytime, it just seems to take longer than that just because of our drive time, that first part of it coming in. So the idea with the per diems is that they would help get the truck out the door fast. The rest of us would still continue to come back in and support them after.
So. The petty whisper would say it's a sticky wicket. You stated that you're full, correct?
Well, our roster's full.
Your roster's
We'll always take more. People want to come on there.
But you sound like you're concerned that you don't have the space for gear.
We don't have racks, so we would have to, move Dick Glidden over to a hook and we put somebody in there. Again, we can manage that, but our gear racks are.
Okay, so you could, the potential you could get more racks.
Oh, absolutely.
More
I don't know
gear.
where we put them, but we could do that.
I think you could find a place. A lot of unknowns, a lot of question marks. You don't know if you're gonna have a fire between 6 AM or 6 PM or 6 PM. It's an unknown. It's the truth. There's nobody here that can predict. So do we utilize anybody else in the town that has qualifications that isn't part of the department during the day? Like EMS, I know, I've got a list in front of me. I can count 9 names that are firefighter qualified from another town, maybe. And I understand if they're here. But if they've got permission to leave, now I know they're not gonna leave in a little CPR, but there's so many unknowns. But if they're here and can do the job, to jump on a truck and get it there. there's some assets here that we should be using.
I think we have to be careful about you pulling. Someone from the ambulance service to,
I said with qualification.
well, with qualifications, but I assume that if they're on EMS, that pulls that person off EMS roles.
To some degree, yes, I can tell you that, right now, we have one that. We have one firefighter who's in EMS that has been allowed to go to fires, but they need the permission of the. Essentially officer in charge of the EMS.
And but to go back to Billy's point, the ones that we currently do that with, Billy, are Waldeboro, that are on the roster, that work there.
They're not outside of.
If they're outside on another department, no, we currently do not do that. We've talked about that as a potential. And again, it's one of those things that, will it help? Absolutely, it'll help. It's just like the public works folks. If they're sitting here and there's no calls, that's fine. But all of you just did the EMS budget. You know how busy they are. They're on the road quite a bit. So they have downtime? Absolutely. They have downtime. And those are the times Gabe's been able to jump on and come on, and Booker will step in and fill his shift. But on a regular basis, we haven't looked at doing that any more than what we're doing.
Is it something you're open to look at?
Yeah, Derek and I talked about it.
Yeah, because I'm, can I mention names in this meeting or shouldn't I mention names? I shouldn't.
Position's fine. Position's fine.
Well, I'm looking at a list from EMS that I can see 3 firefighters. And if they have the permission from the director and they're not busy, are you open to say, hey, come on over, Mr. XYZ?
Yeah, I mean, Derek and I've talked about it. I mean, we're open to it. Again, we don't feel that that's the answer. Will it help? Yes, it'll help.
Count on it.
But we don't feel that it's always going to be available.
Go ahead.
Just in terms of response time, this sounds like a big issue here is in the perceived need for DM staff revolves around response time.
Well, and to help the ones that we do have responding are getting to. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm sorry, Dale.
Hey. I'm probably older than they are, so.
Their service life is on the other end of the spectrum for it. So that they're responding, and those numbers, that's why it's hard to give you data, because it doesn't show you these individual people that are there. So it's not just the time, it's in addition to the ones that are responding are the older retired folks. And we feel that we wish we could have some younger, trained, qualified people to go.
But we would never
That answer?
discriminate against somebody by age in the
Yes.
hiring process.
Thank you. That's why I'm trying to be very.
As long as I can still lift 50 pounds. Okay, I get that. One thing that I've noticed about this town, and I wholeheartedly support, is that the police officers keep their cars, the town's police cars, at their homes. So that's a lot of time in getting to wherever they need to be. Does driving to the fire station to pick up your gear make sense when they could have that gear at their home?
Couple things that fit into that. Some departments do that. My number one concern with that is that fire gear is full of carcinogens. We wear them in places that are not good places. And it can, now we wash it, we clean it, we do all that. And you put it in your car, and then you put your kids in that car. There's all kinds of issues that come with that. Secondly, if everybody takes their gear home and everybody responds to the scene, we gotta make sure that a truck gets there at some point. This way we come, everybody responds to one central location, we go out. It. I don't know, and I'll open this up to the rest of you. How much time that would really. Some
Well,
circumstances, I mean,
If if you've got a volunteer on Dutch Neck and the fire's in Dutch Neck, he can be there in 3 minutes.
you can't do anything without a truck.
Understood. But somebody who lives near the truck can be driving.
Yeah, currently, the way it works is I go direct. I don't come here first, I respond direct to the scene. Plus, it's in Dale's neighborhood. Those who don't know, this is Dale Smith, he's our deputy fire chief. If it's in his neighborhood up on Washington Road, he'll go direct. And I may come to the station depending on the call, so that one of us generally responds direct. And that's why Kyle had difficulty when he was collecting some of the data. Because our response times look really good, but most of the time it was because it was me. That went direct there and signed on scene, and we never tracked when the first truck got there, we just tracked when the first person got there.
I think, this is a very serious issue in every town in Maine, like you said, nationwide is dealing with this. With volunteer fire departments. I mean, there's a lot more training involved, a lot more hours involved than 40 years ago. Where you were just given a helmet and a jacket, told this fire truck, plug the hose in and spray water. And in a lot of other towns in our area, such as Newcastle, Bristol, some of the other towns, area-wise, we're a pretty good sized town. All of our equipment is centralized here in the middle of town. We don't have trucks stationed in North Waldeboro, South Waldeboro, West Waldeboro, Dutch Neck, or wherever. My question is, on the per diem side, if we had a per diem firefighters, or the two that you're proposing, what hours would you have them scheduled? And I guess the first question ahead of that is, do we have any numbers as to how many calls we get within that block of time, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Is
And the hours we would be looking at, or that I'm recommending, are 8 to 4. Kyle, you have that? Number there.
so you have the numbers of how many calls we've gotten in the last year or two on.
Yeah. During that time frame. Back to your question. I'm not opposed to looking at that. I've got concerns about it, about firefighters responding direct. That doesn't mean that it's ruled out.
Okay.
All right, I tend to lean against it. We have towns around us that do that. And there are times, any of these folks can tell you that when we arrive on scene at their scenes, we can't get our fire truck near the scene because there's so many pickup trucks and cars in the road blocking our access because they all come in their personally owned cars. So I think it would cause probably I don't want to say as much, but probably as much problems as it would solutions. But we're not opposed to looking at it.
Me?
Yes.
I'm a little concerned about the fact that businesses aren't getting involved the way they might. And I'm wondering whether or not, let me ask this question first. If the businesses were behind every single guy who volunteered, and every single one of them could respond, no matter what the time of day, would you be talking to us about a per diem?
Not with the current roster, yes, because they don't work in town. We've got business owners in other towns in Damariscotta You know, these two are allowed to leave work if they want to. DJ works in Rockland, he's allowed to leave work to come. The folks aren't working in town, so we can approach the business owners.
All right, so it's not a business issue then so much. With what I'm hearing from you.
Not Waldeboro business.
Well,
Yeah.
even Damascotta.
Yeah, but if
Does it have to be a Waldeboro resident?
our department requires you be a Waldeboro resident to join, but like Derek and I've been talking about using some, when we left. Talked about using, like Billy brought up. You know. So there is a potential that those folks that work on EMS, they might be able to do something. They wouldn't be Waldeboro residents. Yes, Mr. Vale.
What's the rationale for requiring, apart from that you got a stake in the game, what's the rationale for having them be Waldeboro residents?
We've had several times we tried outside Waldeboro residents and it hasn't worked to Waldeboro's benefit.
Okay.
Generally, they tend to be on another department.
I see.
And they come here because they like Waldeboro because we're busy. We do a lot. We've got an incredible crew, you know. Like to be together, they like to work together and people enjoy coming here and working with us. So, but if they're generally outside of town, it hasn't worked well in the past.
I'm gonna go back to my original question. Said the per diem would be 8 to 4. You have statistics or numbers of how many calls you've received in the last year or two between those hours. In addition,
I ran all, I ran all the numbers.
in
Right,
addition-
so over the last 10 years, 8 to 4, we've averaged 105 calls a year. Between 8 and 4. Last year we had 161. 2021 was 108, 2021 33. So. Call volume up. What's what it tells you, the total number of calls.
I want to finish, please.
I didn't say a word, I just
You're next.
don't get antsy over there.
And out of those calls, what type of calls were they?
There you go.
I mean,
Structured car fires, there was, an average, I mean, you want last year or the average? I'll give you both. Last year, we had 13, between structure and car fires, 13, average of 10. Motor vehicle accidents last year, 45, an average of 33. Alarm investigations, 28, an average of 19. Tree down, wires down, service calls, 31, an average of 17. Others that just didn't fit into any, that was just a bunch of miscellaneous, there was 7, average of 6. Wildland fires was a busy year last year, it was very dry, had 15, an average of 4.5. Chimney fires, 6, average of just under 3. Hazmat responses, 6, just under 3. Mutual aid calls was on average at 10 for last year
That we received or we went to.
that we go to.
these
Yeah,
are,
we receive mutual aid on all structure fires. We receive mutual aid. We don't count that because that's counted in our structure fire numbers, but these are, when we tag a mutual aid call, that means we're leaving town.
you throw it, and that's great, and you throw out a lot of numbers, and I stopped after a couple, but. In all those calls. Do you know how many times you didn't have adequate response or personnel?
See, and that's hard data to collect, like, we know how many showed up total. But we don't know if somebody showed up 2 hours into the incident, like, we don't track when each person shows up. So we know what the total was, and how many people were there by the time it was done, but we don't know. Like during the day, you could have Dale and Dick Glidden. Be the first 2 here. And then it could be 15 minutes later, Steve and I show up from Damascotta. We don't know what time the people showed up. That data I can't collect. We don't have any way of capturing.
One of the concerns I have is, if we have a per diem driver, operator, firefighter, and a firefighter, so 2 people. My house is burning and my family's inside the house. What's the
It's
Can they,
four.
can they respond in there as soon as they arrive a mile or two up the road? To go in, or do they have to wait for other people to get there?
We've never waited before.
It's a risk assessment decision.
Well, and I understand, I certainly understand.
That's what it calls for and what you really do.
Well,
But
I
it's-
do,
I
but
can't stand here on the record
is there anything
in
in
public and say that people are gonna go inside when that's not what. the
Well, I know
rule
they
is.
will.
But I can tell you it's been done in this town before and I can guarantee.
So. That begs the question. Is, and you and I have had this discussion. Is 2 or 4 the right number? Because you're still gonna be waiting 15 minutes for the volunteers to.
We've done a lot in the past. I mean, Billy and Kyle can tell you that they did one, that was just 2 of them got it started with 2 of them. More people showed up, backed them up, came from other towns, came from other places.
Andrew and Dale.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, you do what you're gonna do what you have to
we
do.
gotta do what we gotta do.
And I'm gonna,
And our call volume, and my concern when it gets to it is, I know what this costs. I pay taxes here just like everybody else. I know what this costs. I don't want my taxes to go up either. And I can't justify with the call volume. 4. 2, I think we can, is a fair, safe place to start. And see how we're able to manage, if we're able to take the problem. 300 calls a year. Pay for 4, but I like it. Well, any fire department will like it. I just,
you know, the thing is. The days of the volunteer fire department as we've known it for 30 years is coming to a close. Towns are gonna have to make a decision. If they want a full service fire department. And they say, well, we don't need it. They'll need it when their house is on fire and they need to have a response. God forbid that it be their home. But we could, I'm not saying we need to do it today or this year or next year, but this is something this town's gonna have to look very seriously at, like Damascus or Newcastle. Neighboring towns, and whether it be regional or individual towns, that's something that's gonna have to be considered in the very near future, because you're expecting people, I mean, I grew up in this town, you had firefighters from Sylvania. Local hardware stores, Westons, sometimes school teachers, they could respond to a fire. A lot of us, we don't work in town, right? The people that want to serve. And,
The businesses have evaporated. The
Yeah,
number of
right.
jobs that have left town in the last 20
just
years.
blaming
is
the businesses because
staggering.
they don't have the capacity or the ability to shut down because it's a 1-man or 2-man show. You know, they don't have that ability. And there's a hell of a lot more training than there was 40 years ago. I was on the fire department briefly in the ambulance service. So I mean, that's something that has to be considered. We can do it. I'm not saying we have to do it this year. I'm not, but I mean, I just, if we're gonna do it, I mean, I just want to make, if you're, what you're proposing is, can we do it and do it safely and effectively? That's my speech for the night. Thank you.
I feel that we can do it safely, and again, I feel this. Is the most economical and fairest way to start.
Mike,
I wouldn't want to start right out with. Full timers and then find out that. Our response isn't any better or whatever. With per diems, we have more flexibility to try it, to adjust it to make it work. Work for us. So.
Billy had a question, and I don't know if it was answered or you had a different question.
I think it was
Seth
answered.
asked the question.
That jumped on it.
Val, you haven't had a turn yet.
Good. So in the little package we included in the budget book, the cost for the 2 per diem 40-hour week at $20 an hour, which is what you're proposing.
That's what I initially requested, meeting with. Julie and John Daigle and other department heads. they came up with the 25.
Okay, so the total cost, this is the total cost would be 117 for $20 an hour, or 147,000 at 25. What would, you say you're only looking at 2 years roughly as a viable per diem option, and then presumably, if it works out, you would go to full-time employees. How much more would the full-time employee cost?
So
Is that-
you're gonna put at least $25,000 in, the 30,000, depending when it was done for benefits
Okay,
per employee.
so the
And then I'd have to-
They change for,
So workers' comp, Medicare, pension, overtime, all of that changes based on the rate. And then you also have to add in the health benefits. So the more you pay somebody, so we'd have to model, if you want something modeled, you just have to ask Peg and I, and we'll model it for you.
okay, so
I also want to make clear with that, I'm not saying that that's what's gonna happen.
Hmm.
I just want you to be prepared for that.
there would be an
As a-
expectation.
As a possibility happening.
Yeah.
Because I sincerely think that something is gonna have to happen with our towns around us.
Yeah.
The other towns are gonna have to do something. So I'm not ruling out either us ending up someday being full-time, but I'm not ruling out us being partnered with other municipalities or some sort.
So, if I may, how would you staff the position? Would you be looking for a pool and expect that people would come in a couple times a week, maybe, or variable? Or would you be looking for like 2 reliable people that would be there every day? And if
Ideally-
that happened, would there be a problem with benefits and stuff if they were? Would they be essentially full-time employees?
Ideally, what I would like is I would like for one of those positions to be a Waldeboro firefighter. I would love it if each shift a Waldeboro firefighter is on there. Some of them are already talking about with their employers about maybe doing a 4-day work week or picking one of the days so that they might be available to be here. And then fill in with other mutual aid firefighters in those other shifts. One of the reasons when we started looking at this more closely, when we were trying to figure out what was going on, Derek hired, filled 2 positions recently, and I was on the oral board for it. And we asked one of the applicants, he'd been in EMS for decades and had another career. And they asked, why are you applying for this position now? It was for a basic EMT. He said, never had the opportunity been there for a full-time position at this license level. All the full-time jobs were for paramedics and things, and he was never going to be any higher than that. Great employee, but he said, this is what he loves to do. I feel that's the same way. There's very few jobs out there for a firefighter to be just a firefighter. You have to be both. Like my son just got hired. He's a paramedic and a firefighter. He couldn't get hired just as a paramedic and he couldn't get hired just as a firefighter. He had to be both. I think that initially to start.
And that was my next question.
The pool is going to be very large. Because there's a lot of folks out there that have the passion for being firefighters. They don't have the opportunity to do it. Again, I think that pool should start and go down.
I was wondering about when you say shift, so that to me, that's 8 hours, because you've got 8 to 4. And then the pool, like working the pool into your shift, how many per diem employees do you consider like on average of having per week? So you're gonna have one person do multiple days or one person, like, I just was wondering. what
We
you
don't
thought.
know.
Don't know, it's all
We don't know. Derek told me how the pool,
large.
you know, but he struggles. You know, when we started talking this. 10 months ago to a year ago, we started talking about, they were really struggling filling their shifts. I think when this is new and we get started, I think it's a viable option for us, but I just don't think it's sustainable for long term. We're gonna have to come up with something, whether it's on our own or gonna continue working with other towns to do it.
John,
I understand it all comes down to level of service. What we want to do, and we talked, pile through some numbers out, and we've got the numbers. It's at 3 to 4 a week average.
Yeah.
It's also gonna be a management issue on your part.
Mhm.
You not only gotta get these people to come in and do per diem, but what the heck are they gonna do when they're waiting for that tone to go off?
And we talked about
So
that.
what are you having them do then? Is that gonna reduce the things that your volunteers are gonna have to do, truck checks and all the,
Some of that's potential, some that we've talked about. Right now, Dale does all of our. Every run report has to be turned into a report in the MEFO system. So we talked about the on-shift folks doing that, and then Dale just doing Q&A like they do in EMS. They'll just go in, he'll Q&A those reports for that. Yeah, there's all kinds of things. I mean, we talked about potentially, maybe there's something they can do with code enforcement to assist them. You don't know.
there's a lot of unknowns
There's a lot of them.
for $146,000. So, yeah, but it is level of service. You gotta think level of service. And of those calls during that time period, like Seth said, what calls were they? When did people arrive? Did you really need that many people? Was it a tree down? Was it a tree down? You need to have 8, 10 guys respond right away. Gonna be a public works come and take care of that tree. Obviously, if there's lines involved, it's a different story. A lot of unknowns.
That was one of my questions is, have you talked to Public Works about potentially getting that back? Trees down and stuff in the road like that, back to Public Works where it was before. Years ago when it got turned over to the fire department.
Not specifically.
'Cause I know that, like,
They've been involved in conversation.
Yeah, I know that, but I just didn't know if you'd reached out to him again about, because I know John said he wasn't opposed to it. But you get an average of 19, but that doesn't include, there could be five different roads that get trees down in that 19 average. Another thing is
that during the day now.
that's what I was gonna say is if it's in that 8 to 4 range, Public Works should be taking care of it.
Yeah, and if we get called out, that's because they're doing something else. They can't take care of it
during the day.
during the day, correct?
And another thing too is mutual aid response. What's the response time usually when you have a call during that time frame?
For them to come in or
Yeah.
for us to go out.
Both.
I haven't tracked them coming in. Going out would be the same time frame as any call.
Because I mean, some towns like Warren, if you're on that side of Warren, they could be there probably as quick as you, if not quicker.
It happened.
Yep.
Friendship. And get down,
Southern
sometimes Back Cove or Fintown Road, Friendship, get there before we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, Warren,
I didn't know if you had statistics on that and stuff.
no, I haven't tracked that.
I think. I thought Bill had his hand up.
It is, you keep putting me off, I'm getting old, I can't
No.
remember what they.
Your reflexes.
Not necessarily for Paul, but maybe Julie can answer this, Derek might, on his applications. When we have to hire new police, new EMS, Public Works, do we have a thing on their application? Other special talents, like maybe the guy that's applying for Derek's job that he's got is a firefighter in Portland, or used to be a firefighter in Portland.
So sometimes that comes up in their work experience. We do have an area for special experience. We do not have a box that says, are you a member of a fire department? Which we could add, are you a member of an EMS?
So it's something that could be added
Something that
to
should be added.
application.
Except, well, Derek might have more. His hand is up in the back, so I'm acknowledging him.
So I think the catchphrase, if I was to jump in and help out with this, would be desired qualifications, they're not preferred, it's not a requirement, but they're there, right? Desired qualifications, maybe firefighter, you might need CDL license, whatever the town felt was helpful, for my department to add, or police department, or whatever, the phrase to me would be desired qualifications.
Well, that would be something you normally wouldn't have known unless you asked, correct?
Unless we ask.
I had another one, but I can't remember what it was now.
And I think Seth was next.
On the mutual aid calls, has Waldeboro been called to other neighboring towns because they didn't have staff to respond?
I've done one in the last couple of months. I went to an alarm investigation for another town. The chief was down east somewhere and heard it come across and knew he didn't have anybody in town and called and asked if I would go down. But that wasn't a full department response.
So we're not responding to other towns because
No, we may be going because they've only got
Because
a
they
few
need
that showed up
assistance.
and they need
Because of
help.
the
they need
But
help.
we've never been called, only that one time that I know of that.
I mean, it's your mutual aid protocol. I mean, it's,
Protocol,
you know, that's why you have a signed agreement with each town that we respond to them, they come to us. We do have one documented case where we did not respond to a mutual aid call for lack of staff. That was
We didn't
last
respond.
year.
And while I'm on the. Would EMS. Have anyone that they could free up that was qualified to respond? And this is just a question. I'm just,
Like it's been talked about before. It's all very dependent on what we have going on.
Right.
We're a busy service, you know, we have qualified personnel that are cross-trained. They may have firefighter training, they may have pump training, they may have all sorts of qualifications, but quite honestly, it really just depends what we have going on. If Andrew Sanderson's on duty and, you know, he's a paramedic and a firefighter, but if that crew, his crew is tied up somewhere on 911 call on the ambulance side, they can't break off to go on a fire call.
but because he's not a spare guy,
But-
he's,
but that's just one individual, one circumstance, right? There's not the only spare person really is myself in my role as the chief. I'm extra, most days unless we're shorthanded, I cover a truck shift, but if not, then, you know, I'm a spare guy who's in the office doing office work back in the group as I need, but, you know, I could go and help out if I wasn't tied up with something different, but no, it's all circumstantial. That's the problem. It's all depends on where we are and when.
so what you're telling me is you don't have anyone that is flexible because of your staffing. That if there was a fire call, you could automatically say. Because you don't know what's gonna happen
Not
15 minutes later
not
on.
automatic.
Right.
But you know, if someone has to go and I'm able to fill in. Like Paul and I have talked about, I would allow them to leave. We've done it before. We do it now. You know, but it's all circumstantial.
Now, Rockland, for example, do you know what they have for staff during the day on?
There's 7 on a shift. I think they've gone to 7 and they're going to 4
It
days.
seems like a lot more now. I think they're training some new people, but I think they're worth like 5 or 6 on a shift.
No, I think it's up to
7 on a shift and they've just added, they were a 3-day shift. They had 3 crews. And they just added the 4th day and they had to do like you've experienced with EMS. You get to a certain level and then the town next year goes here. Well, that's what was happening in the fire service and everybody wanted that 4-day schedule. So Rockland had to add on an entire shift. Just to maintain,
But they run the ambulance too, right?
they run.
They're
the-
cross-trained.
They run the
And
ambulance.
their average work week was what, 52 hours, I think.
That's the, yes, they get it built in
50
12.
plus hours, then they,
They
so
get
they
40,
lowered
get
it.
it built in 12.
right.
One final one. It's good to have a benchmark. Certainly New York City's got lots of fire stations, lots of fire personnel. Small towns have volunteer fire departments. Where is the dividing line population wise approximately between those cities that have, those towns that have full-time fire departments and volunteer fire departments?
I don't have the answer to that question, and I think a lot of full-time career departments are running fire and CMS. Because it comes down to call volume. Waldeboro has a large call volume in EMS, but there's only 3 units.
And typically,
You know, where
if you have a combined department, you are in the EMS department that runs some fire calls, because your EMS calls are always going to be more than your fire calls.
Percentage wise.
And I don't. And one thing clear, I don't foresee this. In my lifetime, this ever being a career fire department. I don't see Waldeboro ever getting to the call volume where we need to go to. Shift work where we'll have people here 24 hours a day, 7 days of work, a week. Rotating to keep the. I just don't see that happening. We don't have the call volume. We still have a strong volunteer force on the off. Hours that still respond and everything's going well there. I don't see that as the issue. The only time I have the issue is what we're talking about.
Bill has his hand up.
This is probably just a statement to the town manager and the select board. And maybe it's time to start thinking about combining the two departments of EMS and fire. If this town is growing to this need. Maybe it's something they really need to go and investigate, that the two departments combined. And if you've got EMS personnel that does have training. But, you know, they might not be able to go, which we understand, you know, there's so many unknowns. But we are probably at that point, maybe.
Bob raised his hand.
As a counterpoint to what you just said, Bill, and after listening to what Seth had to say, I'm thinking it might be worthwhile for the town managers. First, you define a geographic area. Where response times make sense, where they're reasonable. And then once you define that geographic area, and I don't know that we've done that yet. Kind of think we have. But you get the town managers and the fire chiefs and the EMT guys, such as they are, together to have a conversation. To see what comes out of it. Is there a willingness to cooperate regionally? If there's not, let's go on to something else. But if there is, maybe there's a way of exploring that, figuring it out.
I can tell you. As a fact, and I'm gonna try to do this without naming any names. That there have been communities that we have been together with. That we've discussed merging all these together. You know, doing things and somehow fitting in.
With due respect, I'm not talking about merging them all together, Paul.
Okay, well, this was a merger type.
Yeah, I wouldn't,
type
that's
deal.
not what I'm talking about.
And on the fire level, it was working fine. It was when it got to the select board and the town manager level where it fell apart. I've reached out to some of our mutual aid folks and just talked about, let's make sure that one of us as fire chiefs are on all the time. So that if there's a call in Friendship, I'll go down there. If I know that Chief Benner's away, I'll automatically respond down there to back up his folks, just to get that regionalization thought going. I got nowhere. I was alone.
Just to touch on Billy, we did look at that. We actually had Kyle, our emergency management. Who will take a look at that, and there is a report that I can distribute to everybody. That looked at a combined service.
But I'm not talking about a combined service. I'm talking
No, I
about
was-
something very different.
So I was addressing Billy's question.
I saw Kyle's report, and he did a lot, it was a good report. It was. It really was.
But I can distribute that and.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else is.
And I mean, I understand what you're asking, Bob, a regionalization, a regional approach to an issue. And I think that I can say without naming names that of towns is that, again, it becomes a cost issue for the towns. Everybody's in the same boat. We're all in the same boat. We're all in the same boat with volunteer services, but we're also all in the same boat with budgets.
And I want to
And I
make,
think that's what scares people right now, having that conversation.
and I want to make sure that you understand, we're open to that. We're willing to do that. We're willing to work with our neighbors. We're willing to do all of that. Right now, we're just spinning our wheels, and I'm worried about our citizens right now, and if the rest of them, when they open their door, we're gonna go through it, but right now, I'm responsible for Waldeboro. That's what I'm trying to fit.
Bob had another.
One last
follow-up.
comment. I hear what you're saying. But there's at a point where the personalities involved can get in the way. And maybe what we need is a neutral party to come in and look at it dispassionately. Who's regarded highly, who has the qualifications and experience to look at it. Write a grant. There's a lot of money floating out there. And pay a guy, I don't know what it is. I don't know what you pay
Or
someone,
girl,
or a girl, a person.
a person.
I've referred to women as guys before. But pay someone to come in and look at this and get the geographic area defined and get the towns lined up to support the idea, at least, of having it looked at. Because I go back where Seth is. I think we're all shooting ourselves in the foot on this. If we can do it with our garbage, and we do it with our garbage, we can do it with our other services. And I'm not equating them, but I'm just expressing a principle of organization. That's all.
Always comes back to trash.
Yeah,
It
well,
always does.
sorry.
Oh, and,
Okay.
I did mention, I think that Knox County, the commissioner, that the commissioner level is doing a study. And I think that it's gonna be very worth our while to review that study. The town names may be different. But I think that would be a good place to.
We also, in the last meeting we had before you brought it before the budget committee, this presentation is. Having it as a separate article for the per diem people. Are you still open to that?
Yeah,
We're still gonna have to have it in the budget if it does pass, but if it doesn't pass, and then you're asking the people of the town of Waldeboro if they want that.
Yeah.
You know, you're asking 15 people here to make that decision, but. What if we ask the town itself? Are they looking for that service?
Yeah, I'm neutral with it. I really would defer to my town manager and see how, what
I
is
think,
best for everybody.
I think that's, I think if you keep it in your. So I have not been, believe it or not, I have been here almost 6 years and we have not had. I heard about these meetings that you guys have had in the past where a budget article failed and you went to a open town meeting. I've never seen that, but I've heard it's never great participation.
It's wicked fun. Let me,
I heard it's wicked fun. I heard especially when you're dealing with recreation, but
Great.
but
Kyle, we never had anybody die during one of them.
well, that's good. And hopefully our EMS would be there and save the day if somebody keeled over, but. I think if you do that. And you put it on as a separate question, you're not then jeopardizing your, I mean, I can't make a recommendation, but the mechanics of it would be this. If you put it on as a separate question, it stands alone, and then their operating budget stands alone, so then you're not confusing the two.
And that's why.
But you're going to have to work to educate the residents, and that's. That's. You know, I don't think it is hard. I hear that educating our residents on topics is hard, and having gone through this now, we've had a lot of hard topics. That were separate questions in. My time here. I mean, AD Gray was on the budget. How many times? I mean, on the three times we voted, the town voted on that. And a lot of different things. So. I think that. Our town really does pay attention. And I think they care. And I think that. I always say I trust the people. Because. You know, I hear a lot sitting in the chair I sit, good, bad, or indifferent. So I do trust the people to be able to understand it, but you have to take the time to actually educate and explain what you're doing and why, and the cost of it. And one of the things that I think is difficult when you put a price tag on something is what's that impact? Because invariably somebody will vote for it, and I'll give you an example. My first year here, I think it was the Midcoast Technology Institute came on the budget, and that caused a huge increase in taxes. and we had people coming in and my answer had to be, but the voters approved that school to be funded and built and funded. And they were like, but we didn't know what the impact was. So again, when you put on there, say, whatever amount it is, they still don't quite grasp the impact. So I think that would have to be a carefully if you want to put it as a separate question, it has to be carefully crafted, and I think we should be as transparent as possible with it. But I think that's the decision that you guys can make as far as how it should appear. But that's the mechanics of it. You risk, if you put it in the operating budget,
And-
that operating budget going down,
Yeah.
and then potentially having a town meeting that is, from what I understand, historically has not been the same as people coming.
And that's why I would like to make that recommendation,
Yeah.
because I'm afraid of your budget.
Oh, I'm not opposed to it.
I'm just concerned of your budget. If somebody sees a $200,000 increase, they're gonna freak out. And they're still not gonna know what's in that budget. How can they get a $200,000 increase? And if you have it explained out, I know Kyle's gonna blow a head gasket.
I'd say they didn't freak out at the EMS budget last year, or the EMS, or the police budget.
But we
or the
explained
public
it very
works,
well.
I'm just saying.
And you
we-
understand it, Kyle, come on, and you understand it, we understand it, but the average, no offense to anyone, but not everyone understands the intricacies of it that we do. Right.
And I will tell you, just having been out in front of the EMS budget and going to other towns meetings and being called names, and I mean, it wasn't the best experience for a town manager to go through. We spent, I mean, it was 10 months of just constant newspaper coverage and things like that. So I do think people.
And go back to the EMS thing, we tried multiple things before we got to the drastic point. We took us 2 years to get there. So it wasn't just automatic. I mean, we had problems for 2 years
And I'm
straight.
viewing this as the same thing, and I'm
Right,
viewing
I get
this
that, I get that.
as I feel this is a safe, fair place to start.
Yep.
Is what I feel. In all,
Do you,
or for that same reason what you just said.
Paul and I had a conversation today, right, an hour before the meeting. If people are unsure about which way to go and you really want to see how it goes, you can look at it and not look at the full amount. You know, there is wiggle room there where you could say, we'll try at the last quarter of the next year. You know,
Last half.
for the last half or, you know, of the budget year and see how that goes. And develop a plan if you want. That was just a thought that was discussed between Paul and I.
Julie,
Can you have those numbers by the time we get ready to vote on this, on what a
Yes.
half of a year would be, or a quarter of a, you know, break it down to like quarter. Because I get it, I understand, but also when we talk about educating the public, they're also gonna see overall 23% increase. If we don't,
You have to do something. I mean, you can't,
so.
you know, and that's,
And if you look at the fire department budget, and if you just take out that 133,350, I don't know, I heard 114, 118.
well, the 133 is just for that line item. Overall, the total
But if you
cost,
take that out, and we don't touch anything else,
146,918.
146, they remain status quo, nothing changes with them,
Well, no,
they get their hourly
they
increase,
get their hourly.
and pray to God, which we can't predict. What happens during the day between 8 and 4.
The other issue is what you could do is you could try to implement some of these suggestions and questions that have come up that Paul said would help. That gives you, even if it's 6 months or 9 months, however you could potentially do it, is to implement some of these things that are suggestions tonight. I'll make sure everybody gets Kyle's report. There were some wonderful suggestions in Kyle's report. Maybe if we start implementing them, give it 6 months, you might see that, okay, we've funded it for the quarter. And then, just like we did with EMS, all of you wonderful budget committee members come back in the summer. If you'll remember, we had 2 summer meetings last year, and because you have nothing else that you would like to do during summer, and we can revisit in the fall and revisit where we are and what the state of the fire department is. Just as
I would want plenty of time to see how it works in order to be able to prepare the budget for the following year.
correct.
I would want to know how it's working so that we have time. I don't want to come in at the last minute and put something out. I don't want to operate that way. So I would want time to be able to see if it's working and not working. So that's why I'm not really looking towards the quarter. Because
It was just a suggestion, like I said.
I would think you'd want it in the first half, not the second half. Because by the time the second half is, you're already working on your budget for the following year. I think you should have it in the first half.
But my problem is you have it in the first half and then you stop it.
But then
How
we
do you
could have
fund it?
potentially have our summer meetings if we had to. Or even you'd have that data anyways, regardless. Just spitballing, but I think it should be in the first half, if anything.
I have somebody in the back.
The issue that we run into was they need 365 days of data.
At least, really, at least,
You know what I'm saying? So,
especially with change getting there,
right,
the hiring part.
so if you're looking at maybe something in a fiscal year, you know, you can talk about 6 months, you can talk about a quarter, but the truth is, you're really gonna need, especially in public safety. You could run 6 months and be way down in the call volume. The next 6 months could be incredibly extreme highs. It's unpredictable, and you're gonna need that data for 365 days. That's my 2 cents.
I have
Who's
John
gonna,
first and
and
then
you,
Tom.
you're gonna manage them. That's gonna add to your plate too. And the deputy chief player.
This is no, there's no benefit for Paul here.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean. You're already stretched pretty thin, and now you're gonna be managing this.
Kyle, you had something at one point.
Yeah, it just kind of wanted to tie up three, Seth comments, Bob's and Billy's here about, you know, as we look to the future, regardless of what recommendations come out of this committee and what we do going forward, and, you know, really what Seth said is, you know, looking forward to what we're gonna do here. I mean, when you guys read my report, I mean, I'm just gonna encapsulate one little thing here that, this report's already a year old. I mean, I did it last year, so some of the numbers are already outdated. But based on, you know, an overview of what our three closest neighbor full-time departments are, when we talk about combining departments and the things that we would have to go through to fulfill that full-time need. You know, you're looking at anywhere from 17 to 23 people full-time. You can't do it with per diem on a full-time station, just won't work. You're looking at, you know, 1.7 to 2.5 just for pay alone. That doesn't include everything else you need to run your departments. You know, should you combine departments, EMS won't be doing transfers. None of the full-time departments in the state do transfers.
Then that
So-
removes your
So,
revenue.
so you're gonna lose call volume, you're gonna lose revenue. So there's the net gets further and further apart. So again, those are just hurdles that have to be thought about. Hey, some towns take that on and they say, yep, that's what we want. And then people fund it, and that's just what they do, and it is what it is. So, you know, I can tell you that, you know, specifically Gardner last year funded 2 additional people on all their shifts and have yet to hire them all. Because they're just not available. They can't find them. I know they're working on it, but they have not hired all of them yet. So again, that's another, again, you can read it in the report that about the level of people that are out there that are, you know, the desirable candidates that aren't swapping. You can go on any website or any state website or whatever and look at the number of firefighter candidates out there, the number of advertisements every day
They come across Facebook every day. I see them on whatever, all the different Facebook accounts of the, every town's always hiring. So again, that's another hurdle that would have to be looked at in the future, you know, so just something to ponder.
Seth was next and then Bob.
I said I'd be quiet, but I'm not. If we don't fund this position right now, and just let me finish my thought here. If we don't fund this position right now for the next year, are we in a crisis situation? Never know. Because what I'm asking is this something we can study further to find out, looking at Kyle's report, looking at maybe for the next budget cycle, coming in with a better educated, better informed as to some other alternatives. And when what I said earlier is that at some point, not this year, not next year, maybe not next 5 or 10 years, we're headed down, we can't rely on volunteer firefighters. The dedication that your folks do is extraordinary. It's a lot, it's very time consuming, it's a lot of liability, it's a lot of responsibility. And the citizens of Waldoboro, when they have a fire at their house, they want personnel there to put the fire out. And they want them there in a timely fashion. So my question is this something that if we don't fund these per diem people with this plan to this budget cycle, are we in a crisis situation?
Goes back to what Derek just said. Maybe not for the next 3 weeks, maybe not the next 3 months. It could be tomorrow that it could be a crisis situation.
When no one shows up?
I can't predict
Oh, I understand.
the call volume that's gonna put us into that level of, I don't wanna use the word crisis, I don't want our citizens, fearful that, we're not gonna be there, we're gonna be there. It's just that how fast are we gonna get there, and that is what it is. I don't wanna use the word crisis, but next week we could use the word crisis.
Bob.
I was sort of listening to Paul saying that if we were gonna fund half of it, he needs time to get organized and then time to evaluate whether or not what we're doing is actually working. And I'd have thought that the time to do it would be the second 6 months, not the first 6 months. Because he does need time to prepare. He doesn't even know who he would be appointing to those positions at this point. And it may not be until 4 months from now that he actually finds people that he can put in those positions. So based on what we're hearing about Gardner, it might be longer than that. So I think we ought to give.
Full-time versus per diem, it's two different.
That's right, but I mean, the principle is they're not finding the people they need to fill the positions. So I agree, they're different positions, but there's a shortage all over the state trying to find people in this field. But I do think you need time to identify who you'd want to put in those positions, how you define them, how you can rely on other departments to do stuff really you shouldn't be doing. I don't think you should be out there cutting down trees and clearing trees if we have other folks who can do that. That really isn't something you ought to be doing your time with. So
As long as there's not wires.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
Yeah, public.
I've made
Works
my
and
point.
Fire doesn't.
I've made
handle
my
fire.
point. I think if we do this, it ought to be 6 months at the end, not 6 months at the beginning.
I wish there was a way to do the 6 months in the middle, but then I don't know what to do with that last quarter.
If we're only funding, I'm sorry, if we're only funding 2. And let me see if I can do the math in my head here. We're only funding 2 people for an entire year. That means if we're giving a 6-month grace period in the front or 6 months in the back for evaluation, does that mean we're going to have 4 on staff?
No,
Huh.
no, you would just start
Half the number.
half,
So,
you would half the number and then you would start 6 months in.
okay, so we're asking for a full year's worth of 2 additional full per diem employees. But we're only looking for 6 months of it.
So, well, it was a thought that you take that first 6 months, look at what the things that Paul had said tonight that could help. Implement those changes that are in some of the ones that are in, because some of the things that were talked about tonight were in Kyle's report. Implement those changes. Let's see how they go during this 6 months. It might, does it improve? Does it? That gives you something to look at. And then in the next 6 months.
I don't think I made my point adequately.
Okay,
We're doing two staffers per diem for a full year.
no, it would be 6 months.
To 6
6
months.
months.
But 6 months is going to,
No.
Cut it in half. It would cut that 146,918 in half.
And it wouldn't start till 6 months down the road.
Right.
Between
January.
June and
January.
January, he's developing his plan, figuring out what he needs to do.
So we would only.
I must have missed that part of the discussion.
That was just a thought
Just
that
brainstorming.
it was brainstorming that I put out there.
And one thing I also want to say is that it takes a long time to train someone. So that 6 months from now, I'm not gonna be able to tell you how the public works helping us out is gonna be, because they're still gonna be training. It takes a long time to learn how to pump a fire truck. Them driving the truck to the scene, they could do it tomorrow, no problem. But there's a lot, the pumping and operating a fire truck. So I am not gonna be able to tell you that 6 months from now, I'm gonna tell you what an impact Public Works helping us is gonna have on the overall.
So Derek's
Settlement
point that it's a
thing.
year is what you really.
But
need.
not necessarily every call, they're pumping a fire truck.
No, but the calls that we have, they need a pump a fire truck.
I know that, but I'm saying is other calls like directing traffic.
Yeah.
Public work guy can direct traffic.
Yes.
Or cut a tree.
Cut trees. Barricades.
You taking this all in, Will?
Yeah, all of it.
Are you on the fire department yet?
No.
You got an application yet? Would you like an application?
Unfortunately, I don't have time.
And it's genetic.
Yeah, a lot going on. But I would like to see a continued recruitment effort targeted specifically, like put the word out there, because I don't know about everybody else, but I didn't know up until a couple months ago how much trouble you were having during the daytime getting people to respond. I had no idea as a general member of the public or selectman. So I think if you got the word out that that's when you need people, and we really need people, more people could come forward, maybe and volunteer, and then we make room for them. They're geared.
Our Facebook
Clam diggers.
thing that's.
It's planned there. There's a lot of self-employed people in Waldorf. There's a lot of people that are recently retired that.
Our last recruitment effort has been specifically requesting daytime. People is what we have been advertising for. Asking for.
That was based on. Actually a suggestion from,
I think Billy
I thought it was
or
John.
John or Billy.
That was John Block.
John Henley.
John.
Yeah, I mean, John, getting back to your comment, it's a level of service issue. And for me personally, I want the level of service that these guys provide. And if Chief says that this is what we need, I believe him. And I support fully funding what he's asking for the year. And the people that I speak with would support that 100%. I mean, it's math. It's not anything else. And I understand it has to be paid for. Everything else has to be paid for as well. If he could cut it, he would cut it. I fully believe that. We have a revenue problem, not a spending problem.
So if we put this on the ballot, Paul, and made
No
the
problem.
assumption that it would pass. Would you be able to gear up between now and July to start on day one?
I believe so, yes, because, well. I don't know about July 1 because we wouldn't know until June. There. But we've been working on this a long time.
You don't want to promise people a job and then not have a job.
Yeah. So I wouldn't even consider.
But he certainly has them lined up. He knows in his head who he wants to ask.
but
Still have to do work though, right?
Yeah.
You have to create the job descriptions and.
right,
all that
there's,
stuff.
it's not just,
A lot of that's done and it just needs to go through
Process.
the process and channel. Everything's ready, so yes, we would be ready. But it would take time for that to
So you need 3 months anyway,
possibly.
so we could fund 3/4 of it instead of all of it. And not sacrifice anything, John. Because he'd still maintain the level of service he has now.
Whatever he needs, because I don't have the expertise nor the will or want to step in his shoes and manage that. Like you said, that's gonna be a bear. So whatever he needs, I mean, 3 months, what are we fighting over there? What's the economic impact over that? And that's nominal as well. Again, we have a revenue issue.
I like how you put that, we have a revenue issue, not a spending issue, and that's. And that is true, we do provide a lot of service for. I think that's why when you get department heads before you. It's very hard for them to come up with where we cut because we've been so lean. And I mean, you know what we did, those members who were members, and you were here, John, in 2020, the COVID budget.
Yeah.
2021, the COVID budget, I mean, we cut staffing in the office hours down to 32, the recreation department was cut, I mean,
You cut your salary.
I did. And that's a lot of stuff that, we've been there, we've done that. And, again, we're looking at the 23% increase, and that's a good discussion to have. I don't think you're gonna make those decisions tonight, but I think that's what it comes down to, is it's a level of service.
Since we implemented the ordinance of the fire department being able to collect from accidents and stuff like that, what revenue has that created?
He's got the exact numbers that were there. It's not a huge amount, it's nothing compared to
EMS?
Derek's revenue that comes in. I think that probably in the last 3 years, we got 30,000
44,000 year to
44,000.
date since we started.
over the years. Currently, that's earmarked for equipment. So like when we replace a truck. That, we're not gonna have to fund that, but that money would be there to cover it.
I was just curious, because we haven't had that number since it started.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount. It goes right in into that capital and
Yeah.
stays there. But every little bit's gonna help when the day comes that we replace a truck. We'll all be grateful it's there.
Actually, what exactly do we get revenue? What does the fire department get revenue from?
The only revenue that we generate is from the ordinance that we did several years ago. It was originally intended to be an insurance reimbursement ordinance. So that if there was a car accident, that we would respond to, all of you, your insurance premiums, you pay for emergency service response. It's built into it. And we just never took advantage of that before. So if there's a car accident and we respond, we bill the insurance company for that time, equipment.
Does that cover your expenses on a response?
No, he
No.
he provides a billing rate, and when we initially set it up, it was based on FEMA, right?
Yeah, when we originally said it, I thought I was being smart. When I set it up, based on FEMA rates, because I figured the federal government, as their rate would change, we would just go along. We wouldn't have to go back to the ordinance all the time. But surprisingly, the federal government was way under what all the other departments were charging. Yeah, surprised me. So we went back and we came more in line with what other departments in the state are.
The
Charging
company is
for-
Maine-based, and when we were looking at companies that do this kind of work, they were scattered, like there was some in the Midwest, and then I think there was one in Mass, and then there was one that was located in Maine. And they charge 20%, and then the rest comes to the town. And it's been working out really well because I felt comfortable that they were familiar with Maine statutes and they're local and they came here and they have a platform where you can look at any activity that might need attention. And then they send you a check and it goes in the capital and it's been a nice, so far so good.
This is a billing
Billing service,
collection service.
collections, yeah.
Dale, when he does the reports. If there's one that for some reason we don't want billed on there, he can make notations. He answers all their questions. When they have a question, they send to him, he goes in, finds more detail for them. Tries to get it, and then the funds go directly to our
They
bank.
do a lot of work for it too. They'll get copies of police reports and send out notices and they do a lot of work. It's a lot of work to generate the money that they do for us.
But unfortunately, that's about the extent of revenue that we're able to create.
So like structure fires that are insured, that's not avenue that,
Well, we just do car accidents.
does anyone charge for?
I am not
Service?
aware of anyone charging for structure fires. You, Dale?
Using that fire tax. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I don't know, down south, fire tax and stuff like that. Then you get a different number, different color number sign.
It's true. No.
That's true.
Did anybody have any other questions about operating?
What do we have on the table right now? We talked about, half time, half year, quarters, quarters. Using the first quarter to organize and set up and then fund the following 3 quarters for the year. Where are we at this point? Do we
Well,
have any?
I don't think you guys have made a recommendation because I think we're waiting to get through all the departments before you make the final.
Right, before, I don't mean for the vote, I mean, but in the discussion.
I think everything's on the table.
I think
Still?
still everything's on the, at least that's my impression.
Whatever you decide, we are gonna deal with. Whatever. We understand the budget, our heads aren't in the sand. We understand what you folks are facing. We
So-
know it, but we're, this is what we feel we need. We feel it's reasonable. We presented it. Whatever you decide, we're gonna step up and do.
This
what
is your
we have.
plan A for sure,
Yes.
right? Do you have, what is your thought on a plan B, if you can't have your plan?
The 3 quarters probably would be the next best thing. But I want to assure you that I'm gonna continue working to find better options
Mhm.
in addition to this. Like, if this happens, we're not gonna stop working to find a better solution. You
Mhm.
know, but this is what I feel is our best option at this point.
For this time,
Yeah.
not forever, not just for right now.
I think regionally, I think our neighbors are gonna have to come on board. I think
Mhm.
we're gonna have to.
They're not there.
How
yet.
we get there.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure, but
Does anybody have any other questions operationally? Because we do have a capital proposal to go over too.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much.
This was the insert that you got the first night.
And Valdemar has been asking for years for a plan. Go out from our departments. Well, that's what I tried to put together. For you, there is no real requirements nationally or locally that say when you have to replace fire apparatus. So I tried to collect as much different data from as many different fire departments and colleagues as I could. Come up with how we determine when we need trucks, and when they should be replaced. Again, this is just a guide. I understand what we are facing this year. So those dates, recommended replacement dates, those are not in stone. We will adjust and do what we have to make this fit. These are my recommendations for the future. As I started doing the estimated replacement cost. While I was sitting at my desk with my adding machine, my heart was stopping. So they're just getting incredibly expensive. In here, I did mention about in the future of mini pumpers. I am not a fan of mini pumpers. I don't want us to have a mini pumper. But standard fire apparatus is just getting so expensive. I just don't see being able to continue with that. Several towns did purchase mini pumpers this year. We're going to be watching them closely, see how they manage with them. Basically, when you read it, it explains it in there, but it's basically a pickup chassis with the mini fire truck. You certainly won't get the life out of it that we do. In here, I recommend that we continue with the same manufacturer that we have. We've had nothing but good luck with them. I mean, you go out there and you look at them now. The next one to be replaced is a 1989-90 truck, and it looks beautiful. Problem we're running into is getting parts for it. Is the big issue that we're having for it. And the technology is just safety wise and function wise has just gone well beyond the life of that truck for it. But I am recommending in there the life cycle replacement. I listed out for you folks. 30-year cycle for the custom chassis trucks. They're the ones that are built right from the first piece of metal that's taken off the shelf. It's intended to be a fire truck. The other ones are commercial chassis trucks, and that's where you buy a chassis, and that chassis could have been intended for a dump truck, an oil truck, milk truck, for anything, and they turn it into a fire truck. Because of the way it's manufactured, you don't get the life out of it as well. We have one of those, and that's engine 4, and we've been using it more than any other truck. So we're currently trying to figure out moving some of our equipment around to one of the other trucks, try to increase that life cycle, keep it to last longer. And our aerial truck that we just bought, we believe that it's easily going to serve the town for 40+ years for it. One of the things with the ladder truck, just as an example of technology, we're able to galvanize the frame rails on that truck. Back in '89, they weren't doing that. So we're certainly hoping as time goes on, you'll be able to use these trucks much longer.
What, on a commercial chassis truck, what kind of things fail sooner than a fire truck grade chassis, custom chassis?
A lot of times, in our experience in the past, you only know the more and Dale, they was the bodies, they were rusted.
Yeah.
They didn't have the life that the custom trucks have.
They're also not as safe as if you get in a crash either. It's a custom made as well.
Would it be easy to go through this and update it?
Yeah, I have already updated it, but I just was waiting for us to have the capital discussion because I didn't want to keep updating after every department head, so when we have our capital discussion, these will be updated. His, if you'll notice, his updated schedule is a little different than the schedule on your sheets in the capital, but this whole sheet will be updated to reflect changes, taking out if you guys decide what it would look like with taking out the suggestions from the other department heads out of capital and Paul's additions.
I want to reiterate, I understand the budget restrictions this year. So my recommendations, I'm not saying that has to happen this year, even though that date is on there. We've been planning. If you read your town reports, I know you all read your town reports. It's been in there every year that we're gonna replace a truck this year. I'm comfortable that we can wait till next year to do that. And here I also talk about funding them. When I first became chief, they had always put money into the reserve account for trucks. But money was so cheap to borrow 13 years ago that we kind of got out of it. So that's just something for you folks to talk about too in the future. Is my preference is that we put a set amount in each year for each truck. So that when the time comes, we have it, we don't have that huge outlay. Because we cannot control what our interest rates and things are gonna be, so. That's the direction I would recommend going, but I leave that to you folks.
With the development of AD Gray, would you make any changes to your rolling stock?
Not our rolling stock, but I certainly, we've been talking with code enforcement, in the planning office about hydrants up there. Our worst hydrants in town are on that street. So that's my number one concern up there.
What's the lead time now on a truck, Paul?
2 years.
So if you're looking at 2025, that's what you have in the timeline. Would it be,
From the time we order it.
would it be worth looking at bonding this?
I don't think you could save that kind of money in the next 2 years without. I mean, just funding that particular vehicle and your road.
I can't see us saving it either.
Well, what we've
I
done,
can't see you saving it, so I think you'd have to bond it.
Yeah, okay.
and in the past, we've entered into lease purchase and then bought.
Correct. But I can't predict in 2 years what
Exactly.
what that interest rate will be.
That's.
I don't think anybody can. So.
Didn't you just saying that? You don't really expect any greater to go away this year.
I do not.
But like you just said, for 2 years, the order won't get one.
Take 2 years for it to come, but then
And
next year, we're gonna be 2 years and the prices are gonna continue to go up. So I don't want,
the same equipment.
I don't want you to wait too many years down the road, but I understand what you're facing this year, so.
If you stay with the same equipment.
Yeah.
But the price you quoted is good now. I mean, it's good for 2 years down the road.
Right, if we bought it now,
If we
that's
bought it
what
now,
it would
that's
be,
what it would
but
be.
it's. Yes, sir.
Would we get any salvage value for the old?
No, we've never been very fortunate. It's 30 years old. So it's been very little that we've ever gotten for any of our equipment.
We haven't sold a fire truck yet on Gov Deals, but we did very well with the ambulance. It went to Mexico. So I don't know what that market would look like.
One of the problems with the truck that we're replacing is it has an open cab. So firefighters can't ride in there anymore. So we can only take the occupants in the front seats, they can't. Can't ride back anymore.
In America.
That's right. Yeah, no, if any want to ride in it, we've always joked, we said it's the only fire truck in town where kids pass us on bicycles and ask us where the fire is. It's not very speedy.
Which engine is that?
Engine 3.
Engine.
Yeah, but
The old tank car.
Yeah, the old tank truck.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
These numbers are, Paul's estimated replacement costs are much higher.
Yes.
Once again,
they went up 13% this year.
yeah.
Again, just bear in mind that sheet that you have in here, the big sheet and the big sheet of Valsco. You know, we go out 30 years. There's no way for me to accurately predict what a fire truck, an ambulance, or a police car will cost in 30 years. So
Yeah.
some of it's a best guess.
Right.
You know, I'm pretty normally good with 5 years, but predicting 10 and up, and especially after the last 2 years, it's hard. So I'm sorry. I did the best I could do with the information I had.
And when you're reading that, that's exactly how I feel. That's the best I could come up with. And I explained how I came up with it.
Look at these mini pumpers.
We are, right now, I'm waiting, well, right now, a mini pumper is $385,000. And you're paying for a pickup truck with a pump on it. So I'm really. They can.
But you lose your ability to dump and you don't have shit.
No, you have no water, you have no tank.
You're smart.
So. I'm not ruling it out. But I'm really watching these other communities and see how they manage with them. Edgecombe, Friendship, and Camden all three just got them. And so they're three very different communities, so I'm anxious to see. I'll be watching it closely, and if it works out well for them and it'll fit in here. Can be an option.
I see, we don't have a tanker, Paul.
Right, the truck that we have spec'd out to replace engine 3 with. We put a 1,500 gallon tank on that truck, which will be the most water that we have on any truck. Our thought with that is that in conjunction with the ladder truck, that'll give us 2,000 gallons of water on scene with the 2 trucks that first arrive. Plus it's got seating for 12. We get 12 folks to show up on those first 2 trucks.
So there's a pump on the ladder truck, and then you've got another pumper truck. So you got
All
3
our
in total.
All our trucks have pumps.
So if you, instead of buying another pump truck, if we bought just a tanker. Would that make a huge, if you had a 4,000 or 5,000 gallons,
We have, well, no, it would be a 3,000.
oh, 3,000 gallons,
3,000
I
would
mean,
be the maximum. Yes, we've talked about it.
I know that's what Friendship did, and that which helped out.
Friendship has
With a-
there's a 2,400.
20, either way, they bought a tanker, they bought a tank truck.
Yeah,
So
no,
the biggest problem is a water supply.
Yeah.
You've got, every truck you have's got a pump on it.
yeah. If you go with 1,500 gallons is the most that I can put on a single axle commercial chassis.
Yeah.
Custom chassis truck. If we go more than that, then we lose our seating capacity and we lose all of our equipment space. It would literally just be a pond on wheels is what it would be. That's what comes in from our mutual aid towns. Our mutual aid towns do it. Currently, all our trucks are single axle, even our ladder truck. Remember when we bought our ladder truck, that was important to me. We don't have CDL drivers. We train our drivers to go. When you start dealing with 3,000 gallons at 8 pounds a gallon, then you get into some serious handling and serious driving issues. And
We have a CDL certifier
We do.
instructor, so
We do.
we have one now, so.
Yeah, so,
Tanks.
yeah. It's not in our plan to do that. That's not what we're recommending.
But I mean, just to
It is
get the
a
cost down,
possibility.
to get the cost down. You know what I mean, to replace.
In those tank trucks, are they Can they go on the heavy loads limited roads
Got a fire again.
For emergency.
for emergencies? Yeah.
Yeah, we follow all the rules. As far as the posted roads,
Okay.
other than.
Except in an emergency.
How often do you use up all your water on the call?
Depends on the call.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't,
It,
I have no idea, that's why I'm asking.
yeah, no, there are some calls. I mean, how much, what did we use up at Peabody's that night? Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons. Other fires that we get to, and if we get there quick enough, we might use 1,000 gallons. What happens to fire every 60 minutes, Jan? I thought you just. It doubles in size, so,
Have you had an electric car fire yet?
no, but if we have been trained on it, the department went to Lincoln Academy a couple weeks ago along with. The rest of Lincoln County, and we'll be, if an electric car catches on fire, we'll be calling all of our mutual aid towns to come and help put it out. It will burn for hours. Hours and take tens and tens of thousands of gallons of water to put it out.
Can't just unplug it.
No.
Can't just unplug
You're like,
Yeah, but Adam, we have discussed it. We have talked.
I
about
just-
it.
It's, some of these situations, it acts like you don't have enough water to start with.
Yeah.
To get there and get started, yes, but not.
If you people either.
Yeah, but they show up. Our mutual aid, like we said, depending on which end of town, we've got tankers in every town that touches us.
Right.
So no matter where we are, sometimes they're there before we are, depending on which section of town.
Just like they depend on your ladder. You burn the tank.
Any other questions?
Well, the point of that plan is just so that you folks have some idea of where we're headed, where we're at. And again, it's just a plan.
Val?
So the actual numbers you have here, like for engine 3 replacement, 853,000, that's not a good number.
That is today's price. That's
Right,
the last
if
price
we
we were getting.
order one
A year from now,
now. If we order it now, do we pay? Now the
Yeah.
price?
once we find, if we sign, that's the price we would pay.
Okay, because it sounded like with ambulances, we order and then we pay whatever it costs.
No, but that's the price. That's not.
You lock in the price,
Locked
you
in
don't
the
pay the
price.
money there.
Yeah,
You don't pay till you get delivered.
right, okay.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, Paul.
Thank you, everyone. Good.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. for coming.
Good all, please don't hesitate.
So we have a couple of things we can do. I know we've kept you out past 9 o'clock the last 2 nights. I don't know if you want to go through any of the other things on the agenda. I left it purposely long, so it would be easier for Pam just to carry them over to Thursday. I will not be attending Thursday's meeting in person. I will be virtually. And if you'll recall, LCTV and the food pantry are coming. They should not be long items. So you might be able to deal with this list then. That was the date that the food pantry and the LCTV could come. So it's up to you if you want to move on at this point, or if you want to take some time to digest everything and then come back Thursday.
Well, I make the motion to do EMAs and Al's right here, he gonna come on Thursday.
Okay. Kyle's never really, I don't think, come to a EMA budget.
Pretty easy.
How much to about?
Well, I think there's probably 3 there we could do right now.
Pretty easy.
EMA, fire hydrant, street light.
I don't know about this.
You don't agree.
Well, you don't really need it. It's good to have them.
What page is Kyle?
30.
30.
It's just a big buck. It's just a stipend.
Yeah.
It's just a stipend, that's all it
It's
is.
just a stipend and he's well worth it.
Can we make a motion on these? Or do you just want to wait?
I would just wait.
All
I
right.
think we're gonna get confused, don't you, Peg? Yeah.
Pascal, I got a question. You've done a great job with FEMA reimbursement.
It still does.
How's that going?
Good. Yeah, we recovered a fairly significant amount from COVID so far. Let me say somewhere in the neighborhood of 55, 60,000, I have the exact. But that was mostly for overtime, that was authorized, for EMS. Police in the beginning, they kind of waved that off and said, no, we can't really count that. There was a lot of rule changes during as the money dried up, the rules kept changing.
Yes, it did.
So I think pretty much that's how it did. But there was a lot of rules about like if somebody was out sick and you had to bring someone in to cover overtime because they were out sick, you could cover their overtime, and they changed all that, but. The only thing we've been claiming the last 2 rounds is specifically overtime for EMS. To maintain the full coverage, the 724, 365, and anytime we logged an overtime hour, we submitted that. We've been fairly successful in getting that back.
How about weather incidents?
We haven't had any. Knock on wood, really, since the last one was 2013. There was a snowstorm there. It was a windstorm, but yeah, the whole thing with the weather deal, this is such an issue that you have to wait. There's three layers of approval. You have to meet different levels. The state has to meet so much damage, the county has to meet so much damage, and then the town has to have so much damage. And when you meet all the thresholds, then you could, we have recovered, in the past. Close to $500,000, I think, and since I've been EMA director, a little bit more. From all the different storms, but we had a significant amount of storms, 07, 08, 09. There was we had a lot of washouts, and Public Works they were crazy busy there for a while, rebuilding culverts and rebuilding roads, and a lot of washouts, that type of stuff, tree removal. Well, we had trees down all over the place.
And reason stuff.
The storm stuff, no, we've been close. I mean, we track it, but it's been sporadic around the areas. I mean, last year they had a huge issue in Knox County where up on the mountains, they got hammered over there. I mean, some towns lost 300, 400, 500,000. I think was it 152, I think got washed out there by the lake. Out by McGonagall got washed out, and that was, I don't know, 300-400,000. But we didn't get the rain, the rain channel just to the east of us, and we had a normal rainstorm, and they got, they had a deluge over there. The same it's probably 3 or 4 years ago, we had a storm. It was 30, 35 inches we got there in a couple days, where Knox County qualified for damages. We didn't in Lincoln, just because of the way the snow band set up. I mean, we got hammered here in Waldeboro, and we were out plowing for 4 days, and God, it was terrible bad, but we didn't qualify because the rest of the county didn't qualify. Just the way it goes sometimes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Kyle?
You're welcome.
Next on page 31 is fire hydrants. We say this every year, the fire hydrant rental is a public utilities committee mission formula from the state. Even though we own the water utility, we still must pay the fee. Although essentially we are paying ourselves. So that is the 88.3. Do you have any questions on that? And the next was streetlight. There's a $2,000 increase in that. If you'll recall, we replaced our streetlights with LED. That program's going well. We're still paying much less than what we paid.
17,000 around it used to be.
Yeah, right. It used to be around 17,000. We've paid off those streetlights, but we do have to cover repairs of the lights, as they are now our responsibility. So that is the additional $2,000 just to cover if we have any repairs to those streetlights. Bill.
Was the town ever gonna replace all of them in town? Cause I remember going around to somebody counting every street light in town.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
So some were taken off,
Right.
like, so when we got our actual list of streetlights, Max went around. He took them, ones that weren't ours, potentially,
Yeah,
we
some of them.
got rid of. But yes, they should all be replaced. They should all be LED now,
Oh, they are.
yes.
We don't have our
Ah.
street light that aren't LED.
We should not have streetlights that are not LED. And we actually had one put in, or is going in at 235 on the other side, so we're 235 at one meet, just to light up that intersection. On the opposite side of the intersection, just to light that up. And we use Headstrom, we also have the ability to we have a local Waldeboro resident who is an electrician who is certified to work on these streetlights, so we may look at doing something a little bit different with them. Because they're certified to work on both solar arrays and on our LED streetlights.
How did you find that out?
I came in on Friday when he was fixing our lights. And we had a conversation, and it was a good conversation.
Wow, good for you.
So I came in and I was not expecting somebody to be putting lights up, and I was just like, oh, hello. So he's a Waldeboro resident, and we just had a great conversation.
How many units did you plug into this number just to get a number? I mean.
For repair,
For repair, yeah.
5. And I averaged what we were charged last year for a repair. Or 2.
I'm assuming, Julie, these are just bulbs, right? They're not the units themselves.
Well, some of it is still under warranty, so it
Right.
depends. Some of it is bulbs, some of it was warranty work, but you still have to get the unit out, and some of it's the smart, if you'll see when you look at them, they have the little thing up top. I don't know what it's called, so I call it the little hat on top. It's little, it kind of looks like a tiny top hat. But it's the brain,
The photo eye.
the photo eye, it's the brain that works everything. Yeah,
You know, that's a win-win story all around. Is that gonna make it into our book before the, our annual report before the vote?
about streetlights.
Yeah, we're saving $17,000 a year.
We've been.
It's good for the
last-
environment.
We've been doing that for the last 2 years. It is a great story.
Yeah, like I said, they should be paid for.
Yeah.
That's why we did it.
Yeah, I know,
we
it's,
did it.
Pay
It
for
was a
themselves in the
no-brainer.
first 3-4 years.
Yeah, we
I
did a
mean,
good job.
we're gonna be asking the voters for some money. Let's let them know that
Yeah,
we're working
I
hard to
think
save whatever we can.
What John Keller said, we have a revenue issue, not an expenditure issue. We really do. I mean, when you look at the things we've accomplished over the last 6 years, how we've been, our ease of transitioning from and reacting and thinking ahead, we've been really good, and it's just hard when you have these increases because, and we can't really, it was just the same for Public Works and fire and EMS. How do you call up a vendor and say, how much are we going to increase? And they say 15%, and they can't really articulate why, because they can't get it from the manufacturer of why, or how long is it gonna take? Well, we don't know, and that's what's making it just such a difficult budget this year. Like I said in the beginning, most difficult budget in my 30-year career that I've ever had to put together and present, ever. So,
You gotta post your Ws. As the kids say, you gotta post your wins.
we try for sure. So that's our streetlights. Did you want to do general assistance on page 38? So our general assistant budget went up $173. We get reimbursed 75% of our general assistance that we hand out. I will tell you, if you take a look at what we've spent in the past, that number has gone down significantly for what we've spent, and I would credit that to our community navigator program.
Is some of her pay coming out of that general assistance?
She is now our general assistance
Yeah, I know that.
coordinator, so
Is, because
that-
you've only spent 2,600 so far this year to date, that's what it says.
yes. So some of that is her, yes, that would be the $4,420. Or $4,250. That's strictly for GA, it does not cover the community navigator portion of the salary. That is paid out of our, if you'll recall, we combined a trust fund, and that is how that salary is paid.
Yep.
But just to give you an idea, we used to spend much more money on general assistance, although we were reimbursed 75%. But also, our costs in the Philbrook Fund have gone down because our community navigator finds other resources that are available for people, and she meets on an individual basis with people who come in and need assistance. And that has been one of the things that when you travel and talk to other towns and you try to say community navigation is the way of the future. And they're just like, yeah, it sounds too complicated, you know. Throwing money doesn't fix poverty. Throwing money at poverty does not fix poverty. But our community navigation program is moving the needle on it. And that's because of accountability. It's about having that one-on-one time and actually finding the right resources for the people. And I just, you know, it's something that every town should be investing in, all over, I would say all over the country, but we just worry about our little world here in Waldeboro and Lincoln County, so. So that, I don't think it has any questions.
So how is the navigator? Over the last couple of years, how is that affecting our, I mean, these budget numbers here, $1,000, we're not.
You're not spending it, so I believe, like, when I first started, you were averaging right around spending $13,000.
Hmm.
And getting reimbursed 75% of that, and now last year you spent.
10,900.
10,000, and this year you're only into 2,600.
Right, so is that being made up in the Filbert Fund or?
No,
Other. things
No.
that The navigators.
so
working out?
one of the things about this program that's amazing is we're seeing less money going out, whether it's through the Philbrook Fund or through general assistance, because there's so many resources out there available for people, they just don't know. So in the past where we might have had to spend money to do X, Y, Z, and I'll give an example of. I'll give you two examples. One would be finding out that somebody is eligible for veteran services that had no clue that they were available to take advantage of veteran services. So somebody who had come to the Philbrook Fund for rental assistance and general assistance, that in the past probably would have received it, then found out, oh, wait, no, I qualify for VA benefits. You know, that's huge for somebody who didn't even understand what they qualified for. Another thing that's huge. There is, people struggle with addiction constantly. Through our community navigation, a parent and a child, a parent recovering addiction person with the child was put into a program where she could live for 3 years with her child in recovery. Typically, that would have been a rental assistance, but through our community navigator, we found a safe recovery home that accepts a parent and a child, and that parent and child stayed together. And that was a free service. It didn't cost the town anything but time devoted to finding that resource. Another thing the community navigator does, and this is my last story, but I love telling these things because this is proof it works. Without our navigator last year during that really cold snap, and it wasn't this past one, it was the last one. We had a resident who she was concerned about, had checked in on her in that morning, was concerned that she might have been taken from her warm home and put in a different location, she was able to call our police department, have a welfare check done. And I'm convinced that when that temperature dropped, had our police department not gone there and gotten her, she would have frozen. Because she was in an unheated home. So that's just some of what our community navigator does.
And the difference has been that we have a professional handling this now. We didn't. before. We have someone who can actually identify what's going on. And spend the money where it needs to be spent.
So it is saving, like you don't really see it. But even in the Philbrook fund, and that leaves money for things that we need to address.
Right.
You know, and you know, we had 2 instances where we saved people's homes from partnering with CEI. Where people were about to be foreclosed on and we saved 2 people's homes. I mean, people just don't hear about that enough.
And I remember when we first started talking about this, someone in the public said, community navigator? That's like a social worker.
And it's
No,
not a social worker,
it's
it's a
not.
connector, it's a connector. And she just knows the resources and connects them to the right resource. It's all a matter of knowing what's out there and how to access it. I will be honest with you, in my 30-year career, this is the program I am the most proud of. This program literally saves lives and moves the needle in poverty. I'm not saying it solves it, but it definitely has moved the needle, and we have the stories and the accounts to back it up.
Is there any way to do an accounting of the value? that this is?
So we have the charity navigator that we use that accounts for all of these things, and we're well over $300,000 from the inception of the program, but that's not really a real. It's not a actual amount out of a budget, but it's the value of those services. So, you know, I can try to put a price on it, but you just don't know. You can only go by what you used to pay out and what we're paying out now. But the value of those services, like I said, when you can keep a mother who's in recovery with her child and there's free housing and you're a part of that, that is an incredible story, and they're doing well. You can't beat that. There's just no way to beat that. And it costs the town $0.
Human value.
But the value,
There's no price on human
that's
value.
priceless, you know, saving somebody's life is priceless. We do. Another win. See, we gotta put those in the.
Post your Ws.
You blow the horn on that.
We blow the horn every time we have a select board meeting about it. There's been articles about it, but. You know. I don't know if you want to move on to planning and development. That's on page 45. This encompasses the services of our code enforcement officer. I believe I had explained in the beginning that we have we put in money for a deputy code enforcement officer and a code enforcement officer, as the code enforcement officer is training the deputy. And we're going to see some shift in some role reversal there at some point, to have somebody cover when our code enforcement officer is out. Our deputy code enforcement officer has worked gratis as he's being educated, and we are anticipating him beginning really in September to assist the code enforcement officer, and then we'll start some type of a transition, and what that looks like we'll work through as we go forward. This also encompasses, if you'll see, on page 46, other professional services. That is the MCED fee for our planner. I don't know how many of you have met our town planner.
He is awesome.
He is awesome. He is Maximilian. We call him Maximilian worth $1 billion. He has been instrumental in the grants that we get. He was extremely instrumental in getting our $1 million grant for the recreation center that we have 4 years worth of money to spend. He has been instrumental in getting fire department equipment. He has been instrumental in getting EMS equipment, police equipment. He's very good at grant writing and also handles the day-to-day planning board activities. He is not an employee. He is an employee through, well, it's not McKed anymore. Peg, do you remember the name?
I don't wanna call it.
A council of governments.
Yeah.
But it was McKed in years past, but he has just been phenomenal.
Anybody enjoys kayaking, he was part of the
Oh, yes, the kayak
kayak
Grant.
installation over there. I asked him to do it and he went and found a grant
in the
for it,
river.
found the money for it.
Great.
Didn't cost the town a thing,
We're getting
except to install it. That's it.
biking trails up at Quarry Hill. And that was done all through a grant. So, and has an amazing downtown plan, that has, been covered by a grant for the, former Worcester parking lot when the town takes ownership of that. So what we spend, we get back in funding that we don't have to make up in the budget. When he sees the department heads coming, he knows
He
they're coming
runs.
to get money. Paul goes in there and says, we have this, he just made the application. Again, every year we apply for help with the purchase of the fire truck. That application just went in. So that's what he does.
What is it, like 3 years, you gotta put in?
Well, we're on our second year for the pumper. We did 3 years with the ladder truck. So it's something. He got some really good feedback off our application last year that he put into this application, so we'll see. But like I said, that's a very competitive for fire trucks and stuff like that.
He's so good that those grants. You have to get out of the computer section. One department don't, he gets out every time. Like we move on to the next level.
Right. We've gotten like into the third round out of 4, but.
Yeah,
John,
regarding code enforcement, I'm seeing these tractor trailer being permanently set up on people's houses. I thought that was against code for Waldeboro.
so they're not just sitting there, they're actually.
Yeah, they're off the wheels. They're the shipping
The
containers,
shipping containers.
and they're getting set on property, and then, some people will build a roof over it. And some
The
people
tiny
put a
house
little,
revolution.
man, it's not even for homes. It's storage, but it's permanent. They're,
I can mention that to them.
Movable.
yeah, I've spoken with our code enforcement, and even given examples, and they're still there,
Okay,
so that's still happening.
I will make sure to talk to them about that.
That would be great.
Anybody else? The next one, if you want to go to page 48, is insurance. There is not much we can do about insurance. That is set by our insurance provider. It's issued through the MMA. 10% of the bill is allocated to the transfer station. And last year we added an additional pollution liability binder for the newly gifted Sylvania property. This year we did see costs go down by $4,600. And if we turn now to page 52, our debt service again, that is something that is what it is. We are down in our debt service because a couple of things came off. But that is where we are at with our principal. The final garage payment on Public Works comes off 11/23 of this year, which will be in fiscal year 24. We will be done paying for that. And if you'll recall, the notes that we have are for the refinancing we did when the interest rates were very low, which makes us look very smart. And I thank you all for coming in. Again, that was another time where you guys were called into action after budget season and you responded to the call. Have you had enough for this evening?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I just want to say, we'll continue with this list.
I have.
LCTV and the food pantry will be here on Thursday. And all is well. And I just thank you for your time and all your questions. If you have questions in between meetings, please feel free to contact us. And I just need Scott's email and I can send you Kyle's report. With all of you. So if you wouldn't mind coming over.
Sure.
And telling me, I have an extra one of Paul's capital plan, if anybody wants. We just need a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Isn't that easy?
Billy made it. Well, I wasn't here for the,
Oh, I opened for you, not a
yeah,
problem.
okay, so.
Probably.
Move to
What's your
close.
email
Do I have
address?
a second?
Town manager
All those in
at
favor?
waldoboromaine.org. Spelled out.
Got that job down pat.
We have
opened it for you. I can handle it.
I appreciate it. I tried.
It is.
Lucky you. No.